Talk is Management of Carotid Stenosis by Dr. Lakshmi Sudha Prasanna Madam.
Dr. Prasanna Madam, Dr. Madam. She is a consultant vascular and neuro interventionist at Apollo Hospital, Hyderabad, and Lalita Super Specialty Hospital at Guntur. She has presented papers at various national and international conferences, and she is a reviewer for Neuroradiology Journal, Stroke and Vascular Neurology, BMJ Neurology, and Pediatric Neuroradiology. Madam,
Okay, am
please
I audible?
proceed, madam.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Yes, madam, you're audible.
Okay. Once. Good evening, everybody. My talk is on management of carotid stenosis. And first, I want to thank Dr. Rajgaru for giving me this wonderful opportunity. So carotid artery stenosis causes up to 10% of all the ischemic strokes. As you can see, once there is a atherosclerotic plaque, subsequently there will be stasis, and then there is development of wall thrombus and subsequent embolic episodes, after which there will be stagnation and formation of red clot. This is how the carotid artery stenosis will progress to total occlusion. So what are the various vascular imaging we do in ischemic stroke? Carotid Doppler, MR angio, CT angio, and DSA, which is considered as the gold standard of above all the investigations. So what is the indications of DSA in ischemic stroke? Presence of bruit, presence of stenosis in Doppler or MR angio, because both of these are subjective, and in MR angio there are more of flow relative artifacts. Intracranial stenotic lesion on MR angio, because we do not know how much the artifact is affecting on MR angio. Recurrent or crescendo TIS, especially in the same territory, and suspected dissections. That's here DSA is again the gold standard. So the main indication, just to give a start, for carotid angioplasty and stenting is symptomatic greater than 50%, asymptomatic greater than 70%, lesser if opposite side is totally occluded. This is a treatment of choice, especially in post-radiation and post-carotid endarterectomy stenosis. Usually, it's better to do as early as possible. We only differ in presence of large infarcts by 3 to 4 weeks. And by large infarcts, I mean greater than 1/3 of the territory. The main contraindications, which personally I strictly follow, and also all of us, especially in India, we follow, is presence of thrombus is a strict contraindication. Severely tortuous vessels, that again is operator dependent, and serum creatinine greater than 2.5. It is not possible in total occlusion. So let me start with a couple of cases. So is a 60-year-old gentleman, diabetic and hypertensive, with left MCA TIA 1 month back, and with left MCA stroke 3 weeks back, where you can see the left temporoparietal infarct on the CT, and Doppler showed greater than 80% stenosis on the same side. So here you can see, by the time I did the DSA, here you can see greater than 90% stenosis of the origin of ICA. And it's just not important to see the neck vessels. It's always important to document the intracranial circulation. We may miss tandem lesions, or we may miss other causes, or we may miss total occlusion of the T occlusion of the supraclinoid ICA. So here you can see poor intracranial flow. So we went ahead, and this is this arrow is actually showing the spider device, is a protection device, and this is the stent. This is after placement. You can see how the vessel is nicely reconstructed after the placement of this stent. Just not important is placing the stent. Here you can see the increased intracranial circulation. This is actually the goal of doing carotid stenting. The primary reason we are doing is to increase the intracranial circulation. So another example, 67-year-old smoker with right MCA territory stroke. He was admitted after the DSA. He had a recurrent onset stroke on the in the hospital. So Doppler showed 90% stenosis and the fresh infarcts in the right MCA territory, and this is the tight stenosis and poor intracranial circulation. So the technique is same, just placement of the stent and protection device, which I always follow. And then there's an increased intracranial circulation. So what are the advantages over surgery? It is done under local. Patient is clinically monitored during procedure. So no incision, no scar procedure. Risk of infection is low. Safe even when opposite side is totally occluded, where carotid endarterectomy is contraindicated. This is a treatment of choice in radiation vasculopathy and restenosis after CEA. And on-table control angio is done, so we can handle all the complications. So when I'm speaking about carotid stenosis, it will be incomplete if I don't speak about the trials. So usually the first trial is a NACET trial, which showed a significant improvement in the patients in 70 to 99% group with carotid artery endarterectomy. Before this, it was only medical management. And then came the SAPPHIRE trial, which ultimately concluded that carotid artery stenting was not inferior to carotid endarterectomy. Then after these trials, the intervention group was hit by these two trials, SPACE trial and EVA3S trials. However, they were criticized for their suboptimal credentialing and experience requirements in the carotid artery stenting group. Then ultimately came the CREST trial, which, just to conclude, I don't want to bore with the details of the trials. It said that previously randomized controlled trials comparing carotid artery stenting and endarterectomy arms have been criticized for suboptimal credentialing and training of stent operators. But till today, the CREST credentialing and training is the most rigorous reported, and it is used as a model for many future trials. And in the CREST trial, as you can see, periprocedural stroke is actually more in the stenting arm group, and periprocedural MI is more in the endarterectomy group. Of course, the primary endpoint is nearly same in both the groups. And cranial nerve palsies are more in the carotid endarterectomy group. Cranial nerve injury is not benign. 80% of cranial nerve injuries involve motor deficit. So the main conclusions of this is CREST is the largest and most rigorous trial. So there are serious lacunae in European trials. Carotid artery stenting and carotid artery endarterectomy primary endpoints are same in the CREST trial. More minor strokes in stenting arm, more MIs and cranial nerve palsies and access site complications in the surgical arm. Overall complications are within acceptable limits, and cranial nerve injuries are not benign and they cannot be ignored. Coming to protection devices, there are two types of devices which we use in stenting. That's occlusion devices and filter devices. The main difference is occlusions are proximal protection. So before crossing the lesion itself, we just occlude. These are just various pictorial depicts of these devices. Personally, majority of the people like distal protection devices because they are easy to use. These are the various designs of the distal protective devices. And this is actually, you can see this is a distal protective device. This is what is collected in it, and we have sent it for histopathology analysis, which showed the clot. And so this is our initial experience, which was showed the importance of protective devices in the carotid angioplasty and stenting group. So coming to the special situations, especially, let us see one by one. So in bilateral carotid artery disease, let us see with example, 52-year-old gentleman, diabetic and hypertensive, presented with left MCA territory TIS and recurrent TIS in spite of antiplatelets. CT angio showed severe stenosis of bilateral ICA origins. And this is the right side ICA stenosis, and this is a symptomatic stenosis, which is more tight. So obviously, always we treat the first side. The technique is the same, distal device, and the stent is placed. And this is the opposite side, which is treated on the same sitting. So bilateral is treated on the same sitting. So this is initially we were a bit hesitant to do bilateral in the same sitting. So we have done in few patients. Then once we are okay with this, we went ahead and then the main indication, even in high risk groups, especially with poor cardiac reserve, patients awaiting CABG, we can actually cut down instead of a stage on procedure, we can do a simultaneous bilateral carotid stenting. With the important thing in simultaneous is the selection criteria. So let us see CCA. The 32-year-old gentleman is a known case of Marfan syndrome, presented with cardiac failure 1 year back because of aortic regurgitation, who underwent aortic valve replacement, and he was on anticoagulation since then. So he presented with history of neck pain and recurrent motor TAS, right MCA territory. However, there were no acute infarcts. We saw on CT angio dissection involving the right CCA. So in spite of antiplatelets, the TAS persisted. So as you can see, this is the arch, this is the wall, old replaced wall. You can see the proximal dissection here. And then the distal CCA, severe stenosis with dissection. Luckily, the intracranial circulation is normal. So this can be treated. So we did this in a staged procedure, stage 1 and stage 2. So in first step, we stented the proximal lesion, and then this is the first step, and then in the procedure 2, we stented the distal lesion. So this is the final. You can see the 3 stents, telescopic stents, and good intracranial circulation. Patient did not have any further TIAs or minor strokes. It was totally uneventful and discharged, patient was discharged on warfarin. So this is actually was published. So stenting of tandem lesions. Tandem lesions are extracranial ICA and ipsilateral, either intracranial ICA or ipsilateral MCA lesions. About 10 to 15% of the patients with carotid disease has tandem lesions. The reason for doing tandem stenting or even treating tandem lesions is because both are symptomatic. We do not know which is actually the cause of symptoms of the patient. And since it is in a single axis, we can finish both the things in the same setting and come out. If we just treat the extracranial stenting and if we leave the intracranial part, he may come back with the recurrent symptoms, though we will be only partially treating the lesion. We may be treating the neck lesion, but patient may still continue to have recurrent stroke, recurrent TIS. So, however, the higher risk of post-procedural stroke in the series of tandem stenting, we need to see careful risk assessment of risk-benefit ratio in these procedures, because most of the times we miss the tandem lesion. So it's always important. We need to see the tandem lesion. We need to address it. It may be same sitting or next sitting, but it has to be always addressed. So let's see the example. This is a 65-year-old diabetic and hypertensive gentleman with recurrent EAS and minor strokes in spite of double antiplatelets and statins. You can see left MCA territory acute infarcts on DWI. And here is a left ICA origin stenosis here. And you can see left petrous ICA stenosis. Also there is mid-basilar stenosis. This is the ICA stenosis. There is a tight petrous stenosis. This patient, if we treat the carotid stenosis and leave this, he is going to have a increased perfusion, but he is going to have a recurrent symptoms. Of course, there is also intracranial vertebral artery stenosis. So this patient, obviously we treated first the ICA and then went in and placed a small coronary stent in the petrous intracranial ICA and then treated that, and both the lesions were treated in the same setting. So coming to a good special situation, internal carotid artery thrombus. So initially in the NACET trial, the frequency of ICAT was seen in 5.5% of the patients. That time we did not know the importance of this. And then the antiplatelets, death or stroke at 1 month, it was actually 11% in the patients in the ICAT group, that is with the thrombus group. And also the perioperative stroke or death were more in the patients with thrombus. So in a retrospective study, it has found that initial anticoagulation for symptomatic thrombus related stenosis, it leads to low rate of recurrent events, and carotid revascularization can be performed after a initial anticoagulation. Let me show you an example. The 70-year-old gentleman, hypertensive and diabetic, who presented with acute onset left side weakness. And on examination, he had left UM and facial palsy, dysarthria, and 4/5 power. You can see the large infarct in the right MCA territory. On MRI, we do not see the intracranial circulation because of the tight stenosis. So the reason is this is all a thrombus. There is a thrombus. There is, of course, there is a tight stenosis in the CCA, and there is a thrombus present here. So this lesion, if we stent it, it is going to fly ahead. So because of the thrombus, the patient was kept on low molecular weight heparin for 2 weeks, and he was treated with dual antiplatelets and statins. He did not worsen, and power improved compared to the pre-medical levels. And repeat DSA showed this is a pre-DSA prior to anticoagulation. Here you can see the clot has actually, the thrombus has actually disappeared. Now this lesion can be safely treated. So it's technically very normal, straightforward. You can just place the stent and then the vessel is reconstructed. So CABG and carotid stenosis, the common clinical questions we are always asked here. So the incidence of stroke after CABG, especially with unilateral disease, it's around 5%. With bilateral disease, that's greater than 50%, it's increases up to 7%. So the etiology of stroke after CABG, surgery-induced hypercoagulable state, stoppage of antiplatelet drugs, dehydration, embolic from plaque or hypoperfusion, or post-op atrial fibrillation. So according to American Heart Association guidelines for managing carotid stenosis, especially in symptomatic, there is no, in the symptomatic group, we really, it's not recommended, but in the symptomatic group, it is reasonable to consider carotid revascularization in conjunction with simultaneous or staged intervention. In the asymptomatic group, we need to see the high risk features. That is presence of bilateral, unilateral with contralateral occlusion. Even if it is a single-sided carotid, it's better to treat this. And unilateral with impaired cortical reserve, it's better to see this, especially if CT or MR perfusion is not available, we can use a DSA for assessing the cortical reserve. Management options, either endarterectomy or carotid stenting. Advantages of carotid artery stenting, it's a better option in cardiac patients as per Sapphire and CRUST trials. And simultaneous, both the surgeries, both procedures carry higher risk of strokes in the presence of concomitant disease. So it's just as a last, I just want to show one example, because most of the time we see in the clinical practice, because here is a elderly gentleman, a 55-year-old gentleman who is hypertensive from 10 years, recurrent episodes of right upper limb paresthesias and weakness lasting 10 to 20 minutes. The problem is patient has right side symptoms, and MRI again showed the restricted foci on right MCA territory. So right side symptoms, right side infarcts. So, and this is the severe flow limiting region on the right ICA. So the problem is small plaque is there on the left ICA, so this cannot be the one that is causing the problem. So now the problem is which ICA is symptomatic. Most of the, I mean, some of the times we see it and we may be actually thinking, oh, if I treat it, what if the patient comes back? So here, since we want to document it, we have did a diffusion tensor imaging and demonstrated the uncrossed pyramidal tract by fiber tracking. So now the sequence of events are clear. It's a right ICA disease, right MCA territory infarct, and right upper limb weakness. So on the MR tractography, you can see the uncrossed pyramidal tract on both the sides, just different colors of right and left on varial multiplanar views. The uncrossed pyramids. This actually can be seen in a simple T2 weighted image also, but we require a high level of suspicion, and mostly it is actually clinically, because when we want to treat the this kind of lesion, we should be always, it's better to be careful, because once if we treat it in by mistake, if there is some other cause of the disease or the patient comes back with the recurrence, it's always better to document it. So he underwent right ICA stenting. Straightforward, pass the wire, and then the stent is placed across, and there is a good intracranial flow. So this is the first documented case of ipsilateral stroke with uncrossed pyramidal tracts because of underlying critical stenosis of ICA and treated successfully. So in any case, let's not just the carotid stenting. Is any case when we work, it's always better to see why am I doing it, what are the results might be, and will I be successful? Suppose if it is bilateral, is it worth to take both the risks? So it is always a simple logic, and when you think deeply and find satisfactory, we can answer these questions and we can go ahead. So this is my session. Thank you.
Thank you, madam, for a nice presentation of your original work. Now we invite questions from the audience. The virtual audience for the last session of the conference. The last session.
Madam,
Yes, please.
how frequently you see hyperperfusion, madam? It is in bilateral carotid disease,
Yeah, I'm sorry,
especially
I
in
forgot
tight
to
stenosis.
mention that. Actually, in both the series were done in different institutions. The first one was initially done in 2013, and later was the experience till 2019. The main concern was not the hyperperfusion. Till now, I had 2 cases of hyperperfusion. The main problem in bilateral carotid stenting, especially, was hemodynamic depression because of the baroreceptors on both the sides, and most of the patients were actually kept on dopamine or the supportive these things. But hyperperfusion per se is actually comparatively less, especially in the bilateral because of the poor cardiac reserve. But as long as we usually discontinue the beta blockers prior to the procedure, and we manage the blood pressure, and there is always anesthetic standby. So compare it to hyperperfusion. In my personal experience, or even with the experience of the teams with which I worked in the past, more than the if I have to worry, I'll worry more about the hemodynamic depression rather than about the hyperperfusion. But hyperperfusion is a nightmare because mostly, I mean, once it occurs, sometimes it can be small hemorrhages, but if there is a large hemorrhage, again it's nightmare. But it's always better to control good blood pressure control prior and then go ahead with the procedure.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, madam. There are no questions to close the session.